Can you talk a little bit more about, like, just starting from the top, like pasteurization versus raw milk? When did we have to start making that distinction? Because at a certain point, raw milk just used to be everything. Like you said, we didn't have the technology to pasteurize milk. We hadn't thought about it because it wasn't a problem. So when did we have to start making this distinction?
The scientists, the archaeologists, and the medical investigators at the science level have found residues of lactose sugars in vases going back 13 to 15,000 years ago in cave dwellers in Europe and all, various parts of the world. So you think about yourself as a man and a woman and a child and families or a group of people. They were trying to survive. These people were starving. I mean, it was hard to thrive and survive without readily available food sources. You were always trying to hunt or fish or farm or gather or do something to eat. So gathering food and eating was the principal most important thing along with shelter. And if you could capture yourself a mammal, whichever one that was, that lactated, that made milk, a donkey, a horse, any kind of a lactating animal, and you captured it and put it on some crap pasture or grass, and you had clean water and sunshine, you had food today. And you could suckle directly from that teat of that animal, which I've seen pictures of in India and in Africa and even Mongolia. That infant, that child, that family thrived. And you could collect milk into that gourd, which was not clean, by the way, it was dirty. And that dirt was actually the cultures from last week's milk. And that last week's residues, the cultures, the bacterial cultures, inoculated the milk and made kefir literally within 24 hours by fermentation naturally. And that kefir would have a very long shelf life for 60, 90 days, just sitting in a warm environment. And if you strained that kefir, it became kefir cheese or natural farmer's cheese. So it was really, really important for people to be able to have this portable source of food to not die, to not, have a problem, struggling. And so for many, for the millennia, mankind's been doing this in Africa, in Asia, in Mongolia, they've been doing it. In Northern Europe, all through Europe, Mediterranean. Is goats, sheep, horse. The archaeologists and the medical investigators said that it was probably one of the most important things that has occurred in history for mankind to thrive and to have a competitive advantage, as they said. So that said, let's go through all the Roman ages through, Jesus Christ himself. What would Jesus drink? It was milk, land of milk and honey. It was not pasteurized. That's for damn sure. And we have been really, really, really closely associated with our cows, goats, sheep, and cohabitated with them and share much of a genome with them. The genetics that we have are very similar in terms of the bacterial collaborations, the commensal and communal kinds of things we did together was very closely associated. So we didn't have problems with that. Bring it now to the, let's say 1700s, 1800s. People were bringing cows to America. In fact, all the pilgrims went back to Europe before the arrival of the first cow. It was literally one of the things that allow us to sustain ourselves here. Now, the Indians didn't drink raw milk. At least there's no evidence they did, but they ate raw organs all day long. And so organ meats have the raw fats necessary to have the fat soluble vitamins to thrive. So, Europeans were not really into eating raw liver and raw heart and raw adrenal glands. We were more into the raw milk. It was very convenient. But nonetheless, the same ingredients were found in those things. That said, in 1893, there was something called the milk problem. In fact, there's lots written about it. The milk problem identified the fact that there was major problems by bringing the cows into the cities from where they were before, out in the countryside where they had fresh water and pastures and sunshine. And every other house had a cow out in the countryside. It was part of life. You had a cow and a musket or you died, right? And the bottom line was they brought these cows into the city. In the city, they didn't have fresh water. They certainly didn't have pastures. And the cows were housed in these buildings the cows were being fed brewers distillers grains. And when you get brewers distillers grains, it's not a nutrient-dense product at all. In fact, its nutrients have been depleted from it because you're making brewery, making alcohol from it. And the water was filthy, and the people milking the cows by hand were not well themselves. A lot of them had tuberculosis. and there's typhoid fever and all kinds of horrible things going on there. And so the milk, if you think about a cold morning when you're milking 100 cows by hand, you'd put your feet in the milk. Well, I don't know anybody's feet that's particularly clean. So the bottom line is because it was cold. That milk was killing 50% of people that drank it. It was disgusting. And I'm the first to say it was disgusting. And so the remedy was either cook it, and that solved some of the problem because you still had dirty water, and the dirty water caused a lot of problems. So they didn't have the clean water from out the countryside with free-flowing, creeks and rivers. It was the filthy water inside cities with no flushy toilets and just filth everywhere. So there was that pathway of divergence where you had Dr. Henry Coit saying the American Association of Medical Milk Commissions, or the AAMMA, had certified raw milk, actually supervised by physicians in the countryside. That milk was going to the Mayo Clinic to heal people. It was clean, raw milk that was wonderful. Then you got the filthy milk that was being cooked. And of course, that was the industrial solution, right? That was the way to make filthy okay, or relatively okay. Well, over time, and especially in World War II, that won out in the 30s and 40s when America, let's think about the Depression. Nobody had any money and you needed cheap food. Well, in the 1930s, that was the solution. Just whatever milk you got, just cook the hell out of it and you're good to go. And nobody was considering or thinking about the bioactives or the bioavailability or the nutrient content of their food. Remember, in World War II, we were thinking about DDT was good for your skin, smoking was good for your lungs, and nuclear bombs solve social problems, So that was kind of the mindset where pasteurized milk started to win. And there were a lot of lies told about raw milk because the certified raw milk people were thriving, but their milk was more expensive. And the big processors couldn't go get that milk and do their processing with it. They had to, go to the farms, pick up the milk, and then that milk was commingled together with other farms. It had to be cooked because you couldn't control the value or the quality or the safety of it. So by the 1950s and 60s, you started dying off. A lot of the raw milk was dying off, and you saw the cheap milk prevailing. And the last certified raw milk, the AAMM certified, MMC certified milk, was Altadena Dairy in Los Angeles in 1999. So it lasted about 106 years and died off. That's where we picked up. That's where the Raw Milk Institute started establishing the same standards, similar to AAMMC, but a little different, a little more advanced. And then obviously we picked up on that marketplace in Los Angeles where people didn't have any raw milk from the certified raw milk people at Altadena. And so we picked up on that and ran off to the races. And now by building a strong brand and awareness of the science, because I attend the International Milk Genomics Consortium conferences, UC Davis professors that actually study this stuff and look at lactation, look at mammalian milk, breast milk, all kinds of milk. And I'm the only farmer in the room at these conferences every year. And I take that science and I apply it to what we're doing on the food safety side, on the nutrient density side, and on the education side, on the podcast side with the Meat Mafia here. And what do you know? People become aware, especially post-COVID, what builds your immune system. It's not a shot in the arm. That sucker's, it's short-lived, and it's good for last year's flu about a third of the time. So what builds an adaptive and resilient immune system is the biodiversity of bacteria in your gut, where your body builds antibodies to all kinds of things versus just what you got a shot for, right? And so it is the adaptive, resilient immune system put here by Mother Nature's blueprint to protect mankind on Earth. That's now the blueprints of people saying, wait a minute, raw milk, kefir, raw milk, raw butter, cream cheese, all these things of bioactives, and meat, and whole foods, and all these whole food things together feed the bacterial diversity in our gut, keep things alive, well, and adaptive, and builds that mucosal lining in the intestines, which is so important in terms of protecting us. So that's the short course on 15,000 years ago to today. And it's really, really interesting that people are thriving. They're the ones that don't get the flu. They're the ones that have kids in daycare that don't get sick. Or if they do, it's very short because their bodies immediately react to an antibody. They make an antibody. And the ear infection rates are much lower. Asthma gets decreased. The flu, colds, all that stuff is dramatically reduced. And kids are thriving. That's the truth of farmers over pharmacies. And the FDA is really pissed off right now because they want everybody to rely on their pharmaceutical relationships to get the drugs to recover from disease and illness. Instead of protecting against it, and increasing your ability to deal with a chronic inflammation with anti-inflammatory foods like raw milk. They're wanting to fix it with a pharmaceutical solution. So this is a revolution occurring as we speak through education and influencers saying, guys, there's a better way.